All right, back to our top story now, and that of the ongoing situation in Yemen and the unrest which has followed Ali Abdullah Saleh's death. Brian Katulis is a senior fellow at the Centre for American Progress, and he's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for talking to us. What do you expect to be the immediate outcome, then, of taking this significant player out of the equation of Yemeni politics?
I think it's going to take a bad situation and make it even worse in Yemen. What we've seen over the last couple of years is massive disruption and humanitarian disarray and a huge conflict. And I think this conflict continues to fragment without a figure like Saleh on the scene. He was not a great leader. Clearly, he was the head of Yemen for decades, and look at the state of his country these days. His legacy is not a strong one, but his removal from the scene, I think, further complicates an already fragmenting situation in Yemen.
And the question is, what happens with his supporters, who by many accounts are quite numerous and also retain a great deal of power in terms of the operating systems of Yemen itself?
Well, the initial reports, at least in Sana'a, some of his prominent supporters are being rounded up. They're under siege, but they'll, as you say, he has a pretty strong base, so they'll likely recoalesce. And I think that means we're going to see a continued sort of fragmentation and acceleration of this conflict, unfortunately. That's bad for Yemen. It's bad for the Yemeni people, 7 million of whom are suffering from the potential of starvation, and it's bad for the broader Middle East as well.
And what of the Houthi movement itself? In the short term, perhaps you can describe it as being empowered. I mean, they're celebrating what they're calling a victory at the moment, but what of the prospects for the Houthi movement, who currently control much of the north of the country?
I think they will see a moment in their sun here. We'll see it with this rally today. But for every action, there's a reaction. And I think the forces inside of Yemen that oppose them, as well as some of the neighboring forces like Saudi Arabia, will likely turn up their pressure. And unfortunately, I think that means more devastation, more conflict, and the prospect of a peaceful settlement on the distant horizon. And
obviously, the Americans and the State Department has been fairly, should we say, disengaged from the Middle East in many ways. Do you expect that there will be any change, given the dangers that are fraught in having a large, ungoverned space continually in a state of disarray, the humanitarian side to one side? I mean, just in terms of the war against terrorism.
Yeah, I don't see the Trump administration doing anything fundamentally different here. They simply don't care about the people of the Middle East. They have a slogan called America First, and it is even less engaged on the questions of a peaceful settlement in Yemen than even the Obama administration, and the Obama administration didn't do a great job there. So I fear, you know, and now they're trying to distract us with potentially the statements on Jerusalem. I don't think they care about stability. If they do anything, it will be doubling down on the military operations that we've been doing in Yemen and other places that focus on terrorists. But that doesn't produce peace in the long run.
Brian Katulis, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Great. Thank you.
Now, Human Rights Watch has criticised Iraq and the Kurdish Autonomous Region for its mass trials of suspected ISIL fighters. A report by Human Rights Watch says thousands of trials are taking place without a strategy to prioritise the worst abuses. It found police are mostly prosecuting ISIL suspects for being members of the group rather than for the crimes they have specifically carried out. Now, Human Rights Watch says that approach could deny victims justice and impede future community reconciliation. Let's speak now to Sarah Lee Whitson, who's Executive Director for the Middle East and North Africa Division of Human Rights Watch. She's talking to us live from New York. Thank you for talking to us. So what specifically would you want the Iraqi authorities to do to improve the system of justice? I mean, they've got underway. They've already prosecuted thousands of people, many of whom have been sentenced, and indeed some executions have taken place.
Well, there are two things. The first thing that's needed is a national strategy to prioritize the prosecution of the worst ISIS offenders, those who've committed the worst violent crimes like rape and mass murder and so forth, and to ensure that those trials are conducted properly with complete victim participation and a real record of the brutality and offenses that they carried out. They should also deprioritize prosecuting thousands of people merely for membership in ISIS, because membership in ISIS was not always voluntary, nor did membership in ISIS always entail carrying out specific grievous offenses. ISIS had teachers and doctors and lawyers, many of whom joined because they really had no choice. It was the only way for them to continue living and working under ISIS control. It's a mistake to prosecute all of these people and sentence them to death or life in prison.
So how significant is it then for the process of transitional justice that it is a fair, even and balanced and well carried out process?
Well, obviously it's critically important not only that the trials be fair, but that the trials be selective in prosecuting those most responsible and give an opportunity for those whose only crime was membership in ISIS, which may or may not have been voluntary, to reintegrate into the community. Without that, you are going to only magnify the divisions and hatreds and tensions in the areas where ISIS was under control, because the reality is that many people in these areas were completely disenfranchised from the central government, and this is not going to help them feel more a part of Iraq if their loved ones are languishing in jail because they were a doctor under ISIS control.
And realistically speaking, though, do you think that the Iraqi authorities actually have the capacity to provide this kind of rather nuanced approach to justice when they themselves are recovering, aren't they, from so much conflict?
Oh, absolutely. I have complete faith in the thinking and thinking skills of Iraqi political leaders and judicial leaders. I think they understand what the consequences can be. In fact, I think they're doing the opposite of using their thinking faculties, which is trying to cater to populist demands for revenge in as wide a scale as possible. There is no reason for Iraqis not to understand, for example, how even the much milder de-Baathification process that punished tens of thousands of Iraqis because they were members of the Ba'ath Party, why that was such a disaster for the country. Certainly it should be clear that prosecuting tens of thousands of people merely because they were members of ISIS is not a recipe for success.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Sarah Lee Whitson of Human Rights Watch.